Dr. Patterson's book, titled, as we mentioned earlier, 18 Words to Sustain a Life, is an ethical will that he leaves to his heirs, instructions for leading a meaningful, moral, and just life based on principles of Torah and Jewish ethics. The format for tonight will be a dialogue between Dr. Patterson and myself on the first 3 of the 18 words in Dr. Patterson's book, which are for this evening: word, faith, and prayer. Everyone on Zoom is asked to be on and stay on mute, please. Please do stay on mute during the entire broadcast. After our dialogue, we will take questions from the audiences. Those here in person are asked to write down their questions on the card that has been distributed to you, and then turn them in to Dr. William Wallem, who will be collecting them from you. Those on Zoom are asked to send in their questions through the Zoom link to the Congregation Nishmat Am chat room. All questions must be submitted this way so that we all stay on mute. And at this time, it's my great honor and pleasure to turn the microphone and our format over to Dr. Patterson to introduce our subjects this evening.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to my students who I would have thought get quite enough of me, and yet here they are. My wife, who gets plenty of me, she's here. Yes, 18 words to sustain a life, a Jewish father's ethical will. The ethical will is something that appears in Jewish tradition as far back as Jacob, who gathered his sons around him to leave them to his inheritance, his legacy of whatever wisdom he thought he might have accumulated. We see it in the case of Moses, who gathered the Israelites in the 5th book of the Torah, Deuteronomy, to tell them the tale of the Torah. It's striking that part of the Torah is the story of the Torah in the book of Deuteronomy. And another example, King David and his son Solomon. He brought his son to him as he was aging. And interestingly, King David opens his ethical will to Solomon saying, be a man, be a human being. And how do we go about that? A human being in Jewish tradition is a medaber, a speaking being. A human being is not animal, vegetable, or mineral. It's a separate category. When God created Adam, the human being, and breathed a living soul into him, the Aramaic translation says God breathed a speaking spirit. God, and Maimonides, the great philosopher, says God breathed the word into him. What does it mean to be created in the image and likeness of the Holy One? It means having a capacity for the word. It's the word that sustains a life, not just vitamins and vegetables. So these are, 18 words that I bequeath to my heirs. Among my heirs, I count this certainly my children. I have 2 children, 2 daughters. I have 3 grandchildren. My family, my friends. I regard my students as my children, entrusted to my care. So this is for you too. The book contains stories. It contains Hebrew words, beginning with the word chai. Chai is on the cover. It's spelled chet yud. A chet has a value of 8. A yud has a value of 10. Each Hebrew letter has a numerical value, so it's 18. That's where the 18 comes from. It's the numerical value for the word life, and Jews often give charity in multiples of 18, right, for life. This image on the front cover means what the image on the back cover shows. It's a picture of me holding my youngest grandchild. That's what the book's about, holding your youngest child. And I mentioned, it's a book about words, so I turned to many Hebrew words, the Holy Tongue. When one of my daughters was maybe 4 or so, she asked me what Adonai means. And she's trying to learn some Hebrew. In fact, her Hebrew is not bad right now. And I said, well, Adonai is a Hebrew word that we use to refer to God. For a second, she said,
We can't hear.
storytelling. We're taught that if you would know God, the one who spoke the word and brought heaven and earth into being, then you have to know the stories, not the law, but the stories, the Agadah. So the stories are central to Jewish tradition. Stories are the vessels of memory. And what we bequeath to our children is memory. And just on that note, I want to take a half second to present my rabbi with a book of stories.
Oh,
Jewish
my
stories.
goodness. Thank you so much.
We'll talk later.
Let's just say for the record, I will always, always treasure this. And may I share, actually, just opening it up, it's even inscribed so beautifully. And I really, really, I won't read this entirely here. Well, may I? Actually, I would like to. This is such a great honor, one of the highest honors of my life. It says, for Rabbi David Barnett, a good friend, a good soul, and a great teacher. And coming from you, that's the highest of compliments. And it's signed David Patterson, 18th of February, 2024. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. The book is the greatest Jewish stories.
I will treasure it
So,
and use it.
Just by the way,
I promised that it will be shared, as is the concept of our language being shared and connecting with others. Thank you so much.
So let me move on to consider the word. And I have here just a short passage from the book itself. It's a story. And this is the passage. Elie Wiesel once related to me a story from his youth when he worked as a journalist in France. During those early years of his calling, a rabbi, his teacher, asked him what he did for a living. Wiesel answered, I'm a writer. The rabbi was shocked. A writer? He retorted. Don't you know that words create and destroy worlds? And you have the temerity to take yourself to be a writer? Wiesel knew this very well. He also once said that the word is the most exciting of all discoveries and the most terrifying. Through the word, he said, God created heaven and earth, and through the word, humankind is destroying it. Words have the power to create and destroy, to heal and to harm. We all know this. We all know that words can wound, can cut us to the quick. I'm sure any of us would rather be slapped than hear a hurtful word from a loved one. Right? The Talmud teaches us that words and deeds, but first of all, words create angels. They go into the world and do their work and do their work. A word uttered can't be taken back. It takes on a life of its own. It becomes like an angel that goes into the world, and the angel will do its work for good or for ill, beyond our field of vision. This teaching in the Talmud comes from a commentary on Jacob's dream, when he saw angels ascending to heaven and descending from heaven on the ladder. And the sages say, we get where the angels in heaven are. I mean, they're in heaven, they're coming down, but where are these angels going up to heaven coming from? Who are they? And the answer is, those are the angels we've created. They create and destroy worlds, not just this world, the upper worlds, you see. So we have to be extremely cautious with what we say. We should listen not only before we speak to others, but we should listen to our own words before they come out of our mouths. When God revealed the word of Torah at Mount Sinai, a great silence fell over all creation. The birds stopped chirping. The cattle stopped lowing. Silence. God also listened before he spoke. And God teaches us, commands us by his own example. Why do we bury the dead? Where does that commandment come from? It's not written. God buried Moses. Therefore, we have one of the highest of all the mitzvahs, all the commandments, to bury the dead. There's a wonderful book by one of our great sages in the modern period, a man named Chofetz Chaim, and it's called Guard Your Tongue. One of the most serious transgressions in Jewish teaching is what we call Lashon Hara, the evil tongue. Speaking evil of someone is compared to shedding blood. So you see the weight of the word, and trying to fathom what a word is, what a silence is. So I began these 18 words with the word "word," hoping that when my heirs get through the first chapter, they'll take the other ones more seriously. So those are my thoughts, just briefly, about the word.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patterson. And what I'm going to do after his presentation here of each of these words, I'm just going to give a 1 to 2 minute response, and then we'll progress through like that. And then, of course, open it up for questions. So I like the fact, Dr. Patterson, very much that you talked about the creation of the human being as a medaber, something that enables us our quality to speak. And when we speak, we are using words, davar. We are speaking the words, and that is an essential human characteristic, and so connected so deeply to our inner humanity that you spoke about so eloquently. The words are, for humans then, I would suggest, the critical component of language. Indeed, it is indeed language. And our complex use of this then is what differentiates us and separates us from all of the other animal species. Sometimes there are we know of studies that have been done with other animals where they have rudiments of being able to put together grammar, subjects, nouns, and verbs, but nothing on the complexity yet of human beings. Whales are supposed to be very intelligent also. But whales didn't figure out how to get up out of the water and control the planet. So with our words, we do this. And I think what is so critical also is that you have so eloquently noted that the words that we utter have the power to heal and they have the power to destroy. And in that sense, there are a few passages that I think were so luminous in your book here that I'd like to call attention to. One of them is the idea that we are made up of words. And that brings us, unless we're speaking to ourselves only in a corner, which is okay if we're talking about prayer, but that's going to be the next 2 words down the line. We are interrelating with people most of the time. First, initially as we grow up with our family, with our congregation, and then ultimately our country and ultimately the world at large. So on page 8, you noted the soul is mended by what it restores, and it suffers what it inflicts, beginning with the words that issue from it. And that is so profound because indeed we don't often think of the soul itself being mended and the soul injuring itself when you insult someone else or when someone else is insulted or hurt. We think of the projecting the hurt or the insult onto someone else, but remain short of the recognition of how that can do damage in the very process to our own souls and to an element thereby of our own humanity. And also then on page 9, it says, let your words be endowed with luminosity and light, not only for your own sake, but for the sake of those whose lives are attached to yours. And I think that is so true because other people indeed are the reflection of our own humanity in so many ways as well as we interact with them.
Thank you. Shall we consider the word faith? I have selected a passage in my book from Maimonides, who wrote for us the 13 principles of faith. Faith in Jewish tradition, emunah in Hebrew, is not reducible to belief. Emunah means character, upbringing, loyalty, devotion. It's not an assent to what you don't understand. It entails a devotion that demands an action. Okay. One of the probably the most well-known of the 13 principles of faith of Maimonides, who died in 1204, by the way, just to situate him, is the 12th principle. I believe with complete faith in the coming of the Messiah. Even if he should tarry, then the im kolze, no matter what, achake, I will await his coming. And achake, the word for await, is actually expect. I will expect his coming. So as I write in the book, not only shall I await the coming of the Messiah, who will engrave the love that is Torah onto every heart, but I shall expect it, which is another meaning of achake, as if he might be here at any moment. With the performance of this mitzvah, this act of kindness, this good word, this good deed, for the messianic aspect of my soul lies in this messianic responsibility. To have faith is to have this responsibility, to be already chosen for it. And this is an already that is a readiness. Having faith means being ready. To have faith is to be ready. So faith means not only that one day the Messiah will come, as Elie Wiesel once said to me, it means that one day he was there already, calling out to me, calling out to me in the ayeka that God cries out to Adam in anguish, where are you? To the extent that I have faith, I can hear the outcry. Faith improves my hearing. Faith improves my hearing. And this question put to the first human being is put to each of us at every instant. By an anguished God. God knows perfectly well where Adam is. Ayeka is from Echa. Echa. How? How could you? It's the name of the book of Lamentations. Having faith is, it's like expecting the Messiah. Having faith is like going to the window, getting ready for your guest. You don't just await the coming of the guest to your home. You're busy, right? Preparing your home, preparing something to offer. Faith is being not just waiting for the Messiah, but working for the coming of the Messiah. Being ready for the Messiah, saying, here I am for you. Before you've heard the call. Before you've heard the call of where are you, answer, here I am, before you hear, but it's only by answering that you can ever hope to hear it. It's only by answering that you can ever hope to hear it. It reminds me, there's a Leonard Cohen song called You Want It Darker. And the refrain in the song, if you know that Leonard Cohen voice, I'm ready, my Lord. After all of his laying out all of his trouble, his despair, his disturbance, but finally, in the end, Hineni, I'm ready, my Lord. I want to emphasize this, where faith is concerned, we act before we see the point. We do, and then we hear. The cry at Mount Sinai, when the Israelites were asked if they would live by the Torah, they answered, we will do it, and then we'll hear it. That's a cry of faith. That's a cry of faith. And it reminds me, and I'll close my reflection on faith. I think I better pretty soon. There's a story from the brothers Karamazov, as my students have heard me mention the brothers Karamazov many times. You may recall, as a teacher once said to me, you can't claim to be educated until you've read the brothers Karamazov. There's a scene between the young man of faith, Alyosha, and his brother, Ivan, who's the intellectual, like my colleagues at the university, whom I love. And Ivan has to know the meaning of everything. He's like Thales, the first philosopher, who wouldn't take a step unless he could be certain of the firm ground under his feet. And Ivan says to Alyosha, how am I supposed to love life if I don't know the meaning of it or what it's about? And Alyosha answered, it's only by first loving it that you can ever hope to know the meaning, what it's about. Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do it. And then with God's help, we'll hear, we'll understand. That's where faith takes us. Faith opens up the future. Faith is about creation. Creation. Faith means embracing creation, the creator. Now, just one more thing. Please. We're taught that we have 10 utterances of creation, the let there be's, and 10 utterances of revelation at Mount Sinai. And they parallel each other. When the rabbis say, where are we commanded to have faith? Exactly. The Torah doesn't actually say, thou shalt have faith. It's not there. There's no sola fide in the Torah, by faith alone. It's not there. So the rabbis say, well, we get the commandment concerning faith. I believe with complete faith in the first utterance at Mount Sinai when God says, I am God. It's couched in there. I am God, the summons to faith, parallels the opening of the Torah. In the beginning, God created. Having faith means living in such a way that you not just believe, you know God created and God is creating, without which there's no future. Faith, to have faith is to be future oriented, which is the dimension of meaning. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. You know, if I may, in response to this, I'd like to mention one point that I think will arise in the course of our dialogue here over the coming weeks. And I think it's very important to explicate it at the beginning. And that is that many of these concepts, indeed, I would suggest that the great gift of the Tanakh, of the Jewish Bible to the world, is that it presents an integrated platform of ideas that are all connected and interrelated with each other. And to the extent that one can find the connecting links, like if you can look at think of a spider web, you might look at one part, but they're all really connected organically together. And to the extent that we can put those pieces together and follow the links of the transmission, to that extent, we're more skilled and wise in understanding the total framework and the contribution of our worldview. So that having been said, when we talk about faith, there is a quotation that you said, quote on page 20 of your book, and it's very interesting, and I played with it a little while. I'd like to share some of my ruminations on this with you. The verse could be presented, Nishmat Adam Ner Adonai, that the soul of the human being is the flame of the Lord, or the flame of God. Now, that on the surface, then, that means that we, each of us, the created human being through the word, which was the first principle, each of us created through that word, then has that divine spark within us. That is the Ner Adonai, the light of the Lord. But you can also then, if you play with it, you can reverse it. Ner Adam Nishmat Adonai, that we are indeed in partnership with God, and that our own light that we generate back to God in reflection of his love and creative power, that in turn is part of the greater soul, if you will, of God, as we would, because anything that we create, God absolutely has to have. That's a key idea in theology, that God is nothing greater than the greatest good. Therefore, if it's within us, it has to be within God. Now, when we talk about the word and of emunah, we discussed that as an element of you can translate it as belief, but then within that, or a derivative from that, is the notion of basically trustworthiness. In other words, when we say amen, for example, at the end of a prayer, we are affirming the content and the idea of that prayer. And reflecting back to God, what do we say to God? El Melech Ne'eman V'Rahaman Ata. That you, God, are trustworthy. We can trust you upon you. And we do that also in light of your compassion. So a kindred idea, a parallel and connected to idea with faith, is even hope. And so I think you noted, as we kindle our hopes in flame, we commune with the Spirit of God. And in so doing, we cannot always control a response from God. But what we can do is control to a degree ourselves. So as we become trustworthy, that can then hopefully emanate back to God. And that leads to the idea of random acts of kindness that you referred to on page 21. And hopefully during this series, people will have the books, and they could even stop, you'll be able to stop the recording at some point and then look at the citations. So what struck me as I was reading that was, yes, we may encounter random acts of kindness that are done by people in our lives. And I think that was the context in which you mentioned that idea. However, let's take a little microscope and go down a little deeper into that. We may perceive that in our experience of interacting with other people, that we encounter these ideas randomly. However, on the part of the person doing and performing these acts of kindness. They are ideally and nearly always consciously performed, and we would affirm divinely inspired. And so I just thought that these ideas can be connected together with faith and faithfulness. Faithfulness, not only is God, we hope, always faithful to us. We say that in prayer, but we also then, along the lines of what Abraham Joshua Heschel would always say, we need to walk in partnership with God and become faithful to God.
Well, this is a perfect segue to the word prayer. An act of kindness is a prayer in the form of a deed. And without the deed, there's no prayer. Which brings me to a passage from the book where I refer to the Shulchan Aruch. It's the code of Jewish law. It's what every rabbi has to learn, right? The code of Jewish law dates back to late 15th, early 16th century. Okay. Written by mystics, by the way. The major codes of law were written by mystics, interestingly. So it says in the Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law, the question arises, when is it light enough to put on tefillin, the leather straps that go around the arm and around the head, as we're commanded to do in the Torah? But the Torah doesn't say when it's light enough. It says only when it's light, but so we can see it. So when is it light enough to put on tefillin, since we lay tefillin only in the light of day? And the answer is when it is light enough to behold the face of the other human being. If you cannot see the face of the other human being, you have no business seeking the face of God in prayer. No hope of approaching the Holy One if you are blind to the holiness emanating from the face of your neighbor. For only in the face of our fellow human being do we glimpse a trace of the holiness of God, the one whom we are engaging in prayer. In many of the prayer books, we before the morning prayers began, there's the assertion, I take upon myself the commandment to love my neighbor as myself. That's where you start. Otherwise, you never get to praying. You're not praying. And those of you who've been to morning prayer services except on Shabbat during the week, you know that during the prayers you give charity. If you've prayed in a shul in Jerusalem, people come in and go through the congregation with their collecting charity while you're praying. I once went with a friend of mine. He took out a stack of coins to give charity while he's praying. While he's praying. And I say we engage God in prayer. The word for prayer, tefillah, which is related to the word tefillin, the phylacteries we put on when we pray in the morning. Tefillah is not supplication, which is bakashah. It's not asking for stuff, although we ask for knowledge, help us in the movement of return, forgiveness, healing, return us to Israel. In the 18 benedictions, the longest of the 18 benedictions is Modim Anachnu Lach. We give thanks to you. Gratitude. Prayer is an expression of gratitude and love. Tefillah is also a cognate of the word naftulin, which is wrestling. Tefillah, prayer, is as engagement and not just supplication or asking for stuff, is confrontation, reckoning. God speaks to us when we pray with our own lips. We began the prayer, the central prayer, by saying, "Oh Lord, open my lips." It's a line from the Psalms. "Oh Lord, open my lips and I shall sing your praise." You can't pray if God's not at work in the prayer. One of the great Hasidic masters once said, we think we pray to God, but that's not exactly the case, because the prayer itself is divine. The prayer itself is divine. So prayer is an encounter, a dialogue. Prayer requires listening as well as speaking. Prayer is the language of silence and the substance of language. The words that we speak throughout the day derive their meaning from the prayer we utter in the morning, beginning when we awaken. Jews are supposed to awaken with a prayer on their lips, Modeh Ani. First words out of our mouth is thank you. Thank you for returning my soul. Thank you, not for another day to enjoy, but another day to rejoice in. Not for another day to have fun, but another day to go out and engage the task for which each of us is created. Thank you for sending me on another mission. And it ends with Rabbi emunatecha, great is your faith. You see, faith is an issue for God as well. Great is God's faith in me. I've messed up every day till now, and yet he's saying, I have something else for you to do. You're not done yet. That's something to rejoice in. What would it be like to live without any sense of mission? Why get up? Why wake up? That is a horror. Prayer is an antidote to the horror of emptiness and meaninglessness. It's the only way. And I'll just end with this. We're taught that Jewish life, human life, Torah rests on, Judaism rests on three pillars. There's Torah, Avoda, Gemilut Chasadim. Torah is learning, studying, engaging the word. Avoda is prayer service. It also means service with your hands. We have to pray not just with our mouths, but with our hands. Otherwise, when there's no prayer, there's no prayer. And then Gemilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. Each of these is connected to the other. If you only have one, you don't have the other two. If all you have is Torah, you don't even have Torah. If all you have is prayer, you don't even have that. Maybe it's okay if all you have is acts of loving kindness. I think I'd settle for that. But it's when the act of loving kindness becomes an act of prayer that you hear more. You realize what's at stake in every act of loving kindness. Ultimately, you begin to fathom the faith in the teaching that every soul comes into this world for a purpose, for a mission, day by day, week by week, year by year, lifetime by lifetime. Every soul is chosen. The Jews are chosen to say to humanity, each soul is chosen for a task that is indispensable to all of creation. So get out of bed, say thank you, get out of bed and go get to it.
Thank you very much. And one of the other aspects here of prayer, we think of the word tefillah. The infinitive verb in Hebrew also has a reflexive form, lihitpalel. And lihitpalel also then has an aspect or an element of judging ourselves, engaging with ourselves, judging with ourselves as we relate to God. I'm going to enter what I think could be a rather bold thought in the context of this discussion that I hope will be taken now and in the future of the world as a positive sentiment. And that is, just as we in the Jewish world engage in this internal work of improving ourselves and leading a better life in the light of our tradition and the principles of trying to improve the world, as we say, in the kingdom of God. So too, even in the Muslim world, if there is ever going to be the possibility of peace between Jews and those of the Islamic faith, that parallel notion, as I have heard described by some scholars, of ijtihad, in other words, a reflective prayer within the individual themselves, recognizing our common humanity, if that is attuned to the same degree as many of us in the Jewish tradition attempt to approach that with a degree of respect and holiness, that could lead, hopefully, to an improvement in our condition. I had some further thoughts here on prayer, that our prayers consisting sometimes of words themselves, and yet sometimes not even beyond, not only words, but sometimes the silent cries beyond the words. And yes, even the feelings of jubilation and gratitude going to God. These all form part of the bridge, connecting us to God and, of course, God to us. And in so doing, I would suggest creating the bridge between the possible and our actualized potential. And perhaps it might be said that the stronger that bridge becomes, the greater that our vibrant potency becomes. And so our words leading to our faith and encompassing our faith, and then culminating in acts of prayer, can be a fulfillment of some of those highest aspects of, hopefully, our souls.
Thank you. Shall we take questions, comments?
I
Here's
see
one.
this written on a card here from William, so perhaps this is one from our audience here.
So in your section on faith, you say each act of loving kindness bears within it a glimpse of the Messiah, whom we expect at every moment. Could you expand upon this, please? Yes. Each of us, according to the teaching of the tradition, bears a portion of the soul of the Messiah. The word Adam, the word for human being, Adam. The three letters Aleph, Dalet, and Mem are Aleph, Adam, Dalet is David, and the Mem is Messiah. So we each have a part of the soul of Adam, part of our own soul, and the soul of the Messiah, which means we each have a messianic responsibility. This is connected with not just waiting, but working, having a responsibility. You remember my remark that to have faith is to have responsibility. Faith means responsibility, a messianic responsibility. It's all in my hands to do it. It is very nigh unto thee to do it now. If the Messiah has not yet appeared, it means I bear responsibility for that. Each of us bears a responsibility. So, and I once read a Hasidic master say that the Messiah will come when he's no longer needed, because we will have prepared the world so beautifully for him. So yeah, this messianic dimension of faith and work and preparation, being ready. I'm ready, my Lord. Here I am. I'm ready, my Lord. That's how we open the door for the Messiah. A mitzvah is a command. Doing the commandment is making a connection. The root savta means connection. It creates an opening, makes a connection, so the Messiah can enter. And it's, as I said, it's in my hands, our hands, to do it. Other thoughts, questions, anything in the Zoom chat? Dr. Price, are you writing something down? We'll keep writing.
So format, what we'll do then is you'll ask, why don't you ask it? And then because it may not be heard through the internet, I'll try and repeat your question.
Yes. You have a question?
Me and asked me how I was doing. The words, just hearing the words made me feel better.
Thank you so much. I'm going to interrupt there because I will let Dr. Patterson respond. Since it's silence during the listening audience there, I'm just going to very briefly recap what you said. Basically, you thanked us both for the presentation and how this was inspiring to you, and hopefully it will be to others as well. Thank you so much, and we appreciate it. You mentioned the 10 words referring to the 10 commandments, Aseret HaDibrot, and then said that we also have to be careful when we use each words, when those who are enemies of either the Jewish people or anyone else, we learned after World War II, you have to take those threats seriously. and based on your work as a psychiatrist or psychologist that you found in working with couples, that words used become foundational issues for the nature of the communication that they shared. And so I will let Dr. Patterson sort of respond, since he also has known you in other contexts, for your friendship for many years, to respond to the essence of what you were articulating.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Dr. Price, for your excellent comments. I appreciate your reference to the Shoah, Holocaust, Elie Wiesel, our enemies who would destroy us. One of the defining features of the Holocaust is an assault on the word. It's a tearing of meaning from words. Many of the survivors comment on this, including Elie Wiesel. In his own response, and others, Primo Levi, Charlotte Delbo, they're trying to reconnect word and meaning. And I have another from my book, if I can relate a story from Elie Wiesel about human words. He writes this in his memoir, Night. After Eliezer and others had completed their initiation into the camp, they were gathered into the block for their first night in Auschwitz. There was a young Pole in charge who urged them to, quote, have faith in life. 1,000 times faith. By driving out despair, you will move death away from you. And now he says, here is a prayer, or rather a piece of advice. Let there be camaraderie among you. We are all brothers and share the same faith. The same smoke hovers over all our heads. Help each other. And then Wiesel comments, the first human words. These are human words, I write, because they are words that are bound to meaning and therefore words that affirm the bond between one human being and another. The word's connection to meaning is a connection of human to human and human to God, as you suggested, the two relations. And then as I urge my children, my students, my family, let your words bind you to another and thereby drive out despair for you and for others. The word is the one antidote to despair, and any alleviation of your despair lies in the alleviation of the despair of another, in helping another, if only through your words, as Dr. Price suggested, just someone giving you a word, offering you a good word, calling you by name. I have a student who has been very ill and confined, and went outside his home for a breath of air, and somebody who knew him called out his name, and he started crying. And his friend said, what, crying? What's the matter? What's the matter? He said, that's the first time I've heard someone say my name in weeks. That's a healing that can come from words.
Thank you. And we have a couple other questions here. First one is, how can we know, and the word know is underlined, so how can we truly know what our job is here in Hashem's universe?
Well, we have to learn to listen and to look. There is a teaching that says each of us is entrusted with just one commandment in particular out of the 613. And that this is the one we have to watch over and perform. And a rabbi was asked, how do we know which one that is? And the answer is, it's the one you don't want to do. It's the one that comes the most with the most difficulty. But the job is to drive out despair. It's to alleviate suffering. If you've ever seen Groundhog Day, as Phil gradually returns to becoming a human being, how does he do so? by helping anyone who's in need, including the Nebush, who comes up the stairs. And every day Phil has been giving him a hard time, but one day, this day, he says, "Man, you're looking great. You look great." And then this guy just beams. So help in any way you can, and you never know how you can be of help, if only to offer someone a good word. A good word. It does wonders. It does wonders.
Thank you. And then another question here is, what does Emmanuel Levinas say about the face of faith in a mutual connection? That was the way this was phrased here.
Faith, about faith, the face of faith, and their mutual connection. Yeah. For Levinas, the face is the vessel of revelation. The face commands us to engage in acts of loving kindness and forbids us to murder. The face is exposed, as Levinas says. He's one of the great philosophers of the 20th century. It's precisely because of the vulnerability of the human face that we are commanded to protect and to help and to feed and to heal. That one is placed in our care. Where does faith come in? When we behold the holiness in the face of the other, faith comes in, from the premise that creation is at stake in the next act of helping this person. The Messiah might come with the next connection that we make with another human being. You never know. We have to expect the Messiah. When will the Messiah come? When we've opened the door wide enough, and every act of kindness opens the door a little farther. Every lighting of Shabbos candles, every saying of Tehillim, every prayer. That's where, the faith is that the door is opening and saying, "Here I am," to the other person opens the door.
Thank you. We have another question here regarding elements of time. What are the implications? I'm going to change the grammar slightly. For present or past, if we are to be future-oriented, with the supposition that faith itself might be future-oriented.
Yeah, what is, this is connected to the previous question. Levinas says that the future is the other person. The future lies in responsibility. The future means having more to do in such a way that the more we do, the greater our responsibility becomes. The debt increases in the measure that it's paid. The future lies in, and just put this differently, in the task that has yet to be performed, the kind word yet to be uttered, the embrace yet to be offered. It's like Schindler at the end of Schindler's List. Why did I keep the car? He realizes that the scope of his responsibility is infinite. The more he helps, the more urgent the need that he sees, the need that is yet to be met. Yet to be met. Now, this future rests upon, the sense of future rests upon memory. Memory is not about the past. Memory is testimony. Memory is an answer to a summons. Certainly memory in the Jewish tradition, Zachor v'Shamor. You remember the Sabbath and observe it. Bad translation in my views. Shamor means watch over carefully. It's infinitely precious. It's placed in your hands. The memory is a memory of teaching and tradition. Tradition, the Mesorah, which is a message and a meaning passed down to us. It's a memory of the teaching, the tradition that enables us to see how precious, to behold the dearness of what we must watch over. Zachor is the past, Shamor is the future. Your last name, your surname is your past, your first name is your future. The name that you're called by to engage the next task for which you are created. Maybe
Okay, great.
maybe I should stop there. I could go
That
on.
was brilliant. That was very profound. So the card reads here, Dr. Pragwa says, without belief, you cannot have faith. The question is, do you agree?
Without belief, you cannot have faith. That's pretty good. I agree. I wouldn't say no. I would say without faith, belief is not an issue. It's only in the light of faith as engagement, responsibility, saying, here I am for you, that belief comes to bear. I also would say that the content of my belief does not determine the righteousness of my actions. The righteous among the nations are not those who held a certain belief. They may have had a faith that helping those in need matters. I think when you see the faith come to bear, I'm talking, the Holocaust made the righteous among the nations famous, but they go back to the time of Abraham. And if you follow the interviews with those who helped, they come from all faith backgrounds of belief, economic backgrounds, and usually when they're asked, why did you do this? Don't you know you were risking your life? They look a little puzzled. What else was I supposed to do? Anyone would do it, but of course not anyone would do it. So their faith, is it their faith or their belief? I'm not sure, but they understood that something of infinite importance and preciousness rested on acting, on helping, even if it meant losing. Sometimes it did mean losing their own lives, or they're risking their families' lives. I tell my students in the Holocaust seminars who want to write their research papers on the righteous among the nations, okay, but they're going to rob you of your excuses. They will rob you of your excuses. So it's not so fuzzy engaging the righteous. To engage them is to be implicated by them. Whatever our faith or our belief, whatever our belief might be, but to engage them requires faith, I would say.
If I could just add, I like the idea, and of course, as you emphasized in your presentation on the word faith itself, it's that demonstrated action that supersedes belief. We may have creeds, we may have certain in things, but it is the fundamentally from, I think, the perspective of the Jewish tradition, that the deed is ultimately that which is accountable for, which we are accountable for, and to God for whom to whom we give accounting. So we come back to the phrase that you mentioned earlier, Na'aseh v'nishma. We first can engage in the deed, in the action, and then later on we can debate the finer aspects of the belief or the creed or the inner motivation. But sometimes even those aspects can be strengthened by actually performing the deed itself. And so that's faith as demonstrated through action. Do we have any questions from the internet audience that haven't been handed to us here? We've had some that William has brought here, I believe, from those present.
This is it.
Okay, that's it. Okay, great.
We're good.
I think we will basically come to our conclusion, in which first and foremost we want to thank Dr. David Patterson, our wonderful congregant and scholar here, as well as his beloved wife, Synagogue President Jerry Patterson, and our special donors, to whom we are greatly appreciative, Reed and Karen Heller, Dr. David and Jerry Patterson themselves, Bill McManaway and Dr. Sheila Calderon, Michael Schiff, the Ackerman Center at University of Texas, Dallas, and Dreamcast Productions. And in particular, through Dreamcast Productions, I want to particularly mention the name here of Juan Emil Pina Nunez, who is our videographer and technician here for not only for today, but through our entire series. His work is greatly appreciated, and we appreciate that very much. And there is a saying in the Jewish tradition, Aharon Haviv, and that is our executive director, Stanley Siegel, who has done so much to, first of all, find Juan and so many things in the background to make this possible. Stanley, I think we want to give you all a hand. So we look forward really to our next session. As we indicated, it will be on February 25th. And it's on that time that we will then progress with the next 3 words of the 18 words. So special, each one filled with such tremendous meaning. And those 3 words will be the words of meaning, truth, and goodness. Meaning, truth, and goodness. How can you have a religion without those? You can't. A civilization. And it's so important. What an honor and pleasure it has been and will continue to be to share this platform with you, Dr. Patterson. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of our congregation and audience here as well.